at my husband Julian's 40th birthday. My mother-in-law looked at my 10-year-old daughter and said, "You're not one of the real grandkids, sit in the other room." No whisper, no shame. Just a public cut in front of a table full of family. Then Eleanor put her hand on Zoe's shoulder and pushed her toward the door. My husband hadn't seen it yet. Robert stared at his plate. I stood there with my daughter shaking against me. But when Julian walked in and saw her tears, he said one sentence that made both his parents go pale. "Before I tell you the rest, what would you have done? My name is Megan. I'm 33, and I married Julian 4 years ago. Back when Zoe was 6 and still slept with a stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin like it could protect her from the whole world. Julian was not her biological father. That was the fact Eleanor loved to hide behind. But facts can be small things when you compare them to real life. Real life was Julian sitting on the bathroom floor at midnight with Zoe when she had the stomach flu, holding her hair back with one hand and rubbing circles on her back with the other. Real life was him learning how she liked her grilled cheese cut. Triangles, never squares. Real life was him showing up to school pickup with his tie crooked because he had rushed from work just so she wouldn't be the last kid waiting by the curb. Zoe called him daddy by choice. Not because anyone told her to, not because I pushed it. One night, she just said it while he was reading to her, and Julian froze like someone had handed him something breakable and holy. Eleanor never saw it that way, to her. Family had rules, blood first, blood loudest. Blood seated closest to the center of every table. At Thanksgiving, she would pull Vanessa's children into her arms before their coats were even off, kissing their cheeks and saying how tall they had gotten. Zoe would stand behind me with her hands tucked into her sleeves, waiting for a smile that usually arrived too late or not at all. At Christmas, Vanessa's kids got wrapped boxes with ribbons, tags, little inside jokes written in Eleanor's sharp cursive. Zoe got something generic. If Eleanor remembered, a scarf in the wrong color, a puzzle for children half her age, once, a gift card still in the drugstore sleeve. I told myself it was adjustment. I told myself Eleanor was old-fashioned. I told myself time would soften her. That is what mothers do sometimes. We bargain with reality because the truth is too ugly to hold. Julian's 40th birthday was supposed to be different. I wanted one night that felt easy. One night where Zoe could just be a little girl celebrating the man she loved. I booked a private room at Julian's favorite restaurant in the city, the one with low golden lights and brick walls that always smelled faintly of garlic, butter, and expensive perfume. I ordered a cake shaped like the vintage guitar he always admired but never bought. Zoe spent 2 nights making him a card with glitter glue, drawing tiny music notes around the words. "Happy birthday, Daddy." She held it the whole ride there. Then I saw the kids' table by the window, 2 plates, 2 chairs, and 3 children. I tried not to react right away. That was the first thing I remember. Not Eleanor's face, not Robert's silence, just my hand tightening around a chair while my mind rushed to find an innocent explanation. Maybe the restaurant had made a mistake. Maybe another chair was coming. Maybe the 3rd plate was still in the kitchen. Mothers get very good at lying to themselves in public. Zoe stood beside me in her pale blue dress, the glitter card pressed against her chest. She looked at the table, then at Vanessa's 2 kids circling the chairs, and whispered, "Where do I sit?" Before I could answer, Eleanor stepped in. She wore cream silk, pearl earrings, and the soft smile she used when she wanted cruelty to sound like manners. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, not looking at Zoe, but at me. We thought Zoe would be more comfortable in the small room near the entrance. I stared at her. The small room. "It's quieter there," Eleanor said, less crowded. Behind her, the side room sat half open, dim and empty except for folded napkins, extra high chairs, and a rolling cart covered with silverware. It looked less like a place for a child to eat and more like somewhere you put things you didn't want guests to see. I lowered my voice. "Zoe is sitting with the other kids." Eleanor's smile thinned. "Megan, please don't make this difficult." "I'm not making anything difficult. There are 3 children. There should be 3 chairs." That was when she let the mask slip. Only a little. "Enough." "That table is for Julian's real family," she said. "Vanessa's children are his real niece and nephew, my real grandkids. Zoe will be fine in the other room." The words landed so cleanly I almost didn't feel them at first. Then Zoe moved closer to me. Not dramatically, not crying yet. Just one small step, like her body understood the insult before her heart did. I bent down and said, "You are not sitting anywhere away from us." Eleanor gave a tiny laugh. "She's 10. Megan. She's old enough to understand there are different places for different people." I stood up slowly. Not tonight. Guests were starting to arrive then, shaking coats from their shoulders, filling the room with perfume, cold air, and polite little noises. Eleanor looked around, calculating. She didn't want a scene, not yet. So she lifted both hands like I was unreasonable and said, "Fine, we'll discuss it later. I should have known better." 20 minutes later. I took Zoe to the restroom to fix the silver clip sliding out of her hair. Her face had gone quiet. That dangerous quiet children wear when they're trying not to ask something that will hurt. "Did I do something wrong?" she whispered. "No," I said. "Not one thing." When we stepped back into the hallway, Zoe walked ahead of me. Then I heard Eleanor's voice, low, sharp. "This room is for family. You're not one of the real grandkids." I looked up. Eleanor had her hand clamped on Zoe's shoulder and was pushing her toward the door. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was in the hallway, staring at my mother-in-law's fingers digging into my daughter's shoulder. The next, I was across the room with my arms around Zoe, pulling her back so hard her little shoes scraped against the carpet. "Don't touch my child," I said. My voice did not sound like mine. It was too low, too steady, the kind of voice that comes out when something inside you has already snapped. Zoe folded into me. Her whole body trembled against my ribs, and the birthday card crushed between us left glitter on the front of my dress. A bright, ridiculous sparkle over a place where my heart felt like it had cracked open. The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Someone's glass clinked against a plate and then froze. Vanessa's children stared from the kids' table, their eyes wide. Theo still had a bread roll in his hand. Forgotten. Robert sat at the head table, looking down at his napkin like the pattern on the cloth had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. That almost hurt worse than Eleanor, because Eleanor was cruel. Robert was comfortable. "What are you doing?" I asked her. Eleanor straightened her shoulders. "I was handling an awkward situation." "You were pushing a child out of her father's birthday dinner." Her eyes flicked toward Zoe, then away. "He is not her father." Zoe made a tiny sound into my dress. I felt it more than heard it. Something hot moved through me so fast my hands shook. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to tell Eleanor that 4 years of fake smiles did not give her the right to decide who my daughter belonged to. I wanted to tell Robert that his silence had made him part of every insult. I wanted to turn to the entire room and ask how many adults were willing to watch a 10-year-old be humiliated just to keep dessert from being awkward. But Zoe was clinging to me, so I swallowed the scream. I bent down and cupped her face instead. "Look at me. Baby. You are staying with me." Her cheeks were wet. Her card was bent. The corner where she had drawn a tiny red heart had folded almost in half. I smoothed it with my thumb. But the crease stayed. Then the door behind us opened. Cold air slipped into the room. Julian stepped in, still taking off his jacket, and he saw everything. Julian stopped in the doorway. For 1 second, nobody breathed. He looked at me first, then at Zoe, then at the glitter stuck to my dress and the bent card in my hand. His face changed slowly. Not loud anger, not confusion. Something colder. Something that made the air around him feel different. "Zoe," he said softly. She looked up from my chest. Julian crossed the room without looking at his mother. He knelt in front of Zoe, on the restaurant carpet, in his good suit, with half his birthday guests watching. "Can I see it?" he asked. Zoe held out the card with both hands, like she was afraid it had been ruined beyond saving. Julian took it carefully. He smoothed the folded corner with his thumb, slower than he needed to, as if every person in that room deserved to watch him repair what his mother had tried to crush. Then he looked at Zoe and said, "You did nothing wrong." Her mouth trembled. He stood. Eleanor opened her mouth, but Julian lifted one hand. "Don't. Just one word." She stopped. That was the first time I had ever seen Eleanor stop because someone told her to. Julian turned toward the room. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every table, every chair, every person pretending they did not want to hear. "I want everyone to understand something," he said. "Zoe is my daughter." Eleanor's face tightened. Julian kept going, not by blood, by choice. By every morning I've driven her to school, by every scraped knee I've cleaned, by every nightmare I've sat beside, by every bedtime story she asked me to read twice because she liked the funny voice. Zoe pressed closer to me, but this time she was listening. Julian held up the card. "This is from my daughter." And anyone who thinks she belongs in a side room while other children sit at the family table does not understand what family is. The silence changed. Before, it had been scared. Now it was heavy. Eleanor's lips parted. "Julian, I was only trying to keep tradition. You know how your grandmother raised us. Family dinners have always been for blood relatives first." "No," he said. "Tradition is Sunday sauce. Tradition is old photos on the mantle. Tradition is the same song at Christmas. What you did was cruelty with better manners." Someone near the back let out a breath. Eleanor went pale. Julian stepped closer. "Not threatening, just certain. If you cannot treat Zoe like family, then you will not be part of ours. Not at birthdays, not holidays, not dinners, not anywhere she has to wonder whether she's wanted." Robert shifted in his chair. Julian turned to him next. "And, Dad," he said, his voice cracking, "you don't get to disappear into your plate this time." Robert froze. "For 4 years, you watched her do this. You watched Zoe get ignored, separated, handed less, spoken around. Maybe you never said the words, but silence has weight. And tonight, it landed on a child." Robert's face went red first, then pale. "I didn't realize it was this bad," he muttered. Julian shook his head. "You realized enough to look away. That was when I saw it." The whole room saw it. Eleanor was no longer the woman in charge. Robert was no longer invisible. The rules had shifted under the string lights, with a birthday cake waiting untouched on the side table. Vanessa stood up. Her chair scraped, and everyone looked at her. She walked to the kids' table, picked up one of the little plates, and moved it over. "Theo," she said gently. "Scoot down." Theo moved. His sister pulled out the chair beside him. Vanessa looked at Zoe. "Sweetheart, you can sit between them. If you want." Zoe looked at me. I nodded. Then Theo held up a crayon drawing. "I made Uncle Julian look like a rock star," he said. "Want to see?" It was such a small thing. A chair, a drawing, a child making room. But after everything Eleanor had done, it felt like someone had opened a window in a burning house. Zoe took one step forward, then another, and Eleanor said nothing. The rest of the dinner happened in pieces. That is the only way I can explain it. People spoke too softly. Forks touched plates like everyone was afraid of making the room loud again. The cake still sat on the side table, shaped like a guitar, glossy under the warm lights, but nobody rushed to cut it. Even the candles looked embarrassed, waiting for a birthday song that no longer fit the night. Eleanor stayed in her chair. She kept her back straight, her pearl earrings catching the light whenever she turned her head. She cut her chicken into tiny pieces and moved them around her plate without eating. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the kids' table, toward Zoe. But Zoe was not looking back. She sat between Theo and his sister, her shoulders slowly dropping from her ears. Theo showed her the drawing. His sister handed her a blue crayon and asked if she wanted to add stars around Julian's guitar. Zoe hesitated, then nodded. That tiny nod almost broke me. Because children should not have to be rescued by other children when grown people fail them. Robert stood up about 15 minutes later. At first, I thought he was leaving. Instead, he walked to the kids' table and stopped beside Zoe's chair with the awkwardness of a man who had spent years avoiding the right thing and no longer knew how to start doing it. "Zoe," he said, clearing his throat. "How's school going?" She looked up at him, cautious. "Fine." "What's your favorite subject these days, Art?" she said. Robert nodded too many times. "Art, that's good. Your card for Julian was very nice." It was clumsy, painfully clumsy, but it was the first time I had ever heard him speak to her like she was not standing just outside the family photograph. I did not forgive him in that moment. Forgiveness is not a party favor. You do not hand it out because someone finally does the smallest decent thing after years of damage. But I saw the crack in him. I saw shame doing what comfort never had. When it was time for the cake, Julian did not stand between his parents like he usually did. He stood beside me and Zoe. He placed her glitter card right next to the candles, propped open where everyone could see the words she had written. "Happy birthday, Daddy." Eleanor stared at it like it had accused her. Julian blew out the candles, and Zoe clapped louder than anyone. Her smile was still fragile, but it was there. On the drive home, the city lights slid across the windows in long yellow lines. Zoe fell asleep in the back seat, still holding a piece of wrapping paper from Julian's gift. Her hair clip had come loose again. Glitter sparkled on her cheek. Julian reached over and took my hand. "I should have stopped this sooner," he said. I looked at him. His eyes stayed on the road, but his jaw was tight. "Yes," I said softly. "You should have." He nodded like he deserved that. Then he said the part I needed most. "Never again. She sits with us. Or we don't sit there at all." That night did not turn Eleanor into a different woman. Real life is not that neat. She did not suddenly become warm. She did not call the next morning with some perfect apology wrapped in tears. For a while, she stayed quiet, which for Eleanor was its own kind of battle. But something had changed. A door had been closed in Zoe's face, and Julian had opened it in front of everyone. From then on, there were rules. Zoe was not seated separately. Zoe was not treated like an extra chair, an extra plate, an extra problem. If Eleanor wanted to be invited, she had to understand one thing clearly. My daughter was not waiting outside the family anymore. A few days later, Julian took Zoe's glitter card to work. He put it on his desk, right where people could see it. The corner was still creased, but he never tried to hide it. I think he wanted to remember. And maybe I did, too. Because family is not the person who shares your blood and still lets you cry by the door. Family is the person who sees you being pushed out and says, "No, she belongs with me." If you have ever had to protect someone you love from the people who should have loved them too, tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe so you do not miss the next one.